When the Gnut fusion, or the Gnut fusion, however you want to call them, was announced, I was very happy because this champion looked absolutely ridiculous in the game. And then I was also kind of sad because I realized that during this period of the fusion, I would actually be away with family. And so that happened, and I wasn't able to complete the fusion. I got close, but I just couldn't get there. So I never ended up getting Gnut, which was a shame, and it definitely held back progression on my account in a lot of areas. Until a couple of weekends ago where I was pulling some shards and I actually managed to get my first ever copy of Gnut. I believe there was a 10x and like a 2x or something like that on at the same time, which was quite nice. I managed to get him. It was during a fusion as well. I went ahead and I built him pretty much immediately, and I automatically noticed a difference inside some of my Doom Tower runs, as well as especially Fire Knight Hard. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about this champion today, and more specifically, we're going to talk about how I have him built and how I would recommend to build him. I'm going to go ahead first of all, and as usual, pop my infographic here on screen. Now you're going to see that the blessings I recommend, regardless of the Ascension level, or the Awakening level rather, is going to be Soul Reap. Feel free to change this up a little bit depending on what you need. At the end of the day, if you're running him in Fire Knight, you're going to get a little bit more use out of something like Phantom Touch. And then obviously, depending on how you're using him, you might want to run a different blessing as well. Soul Reap is quite nice though, and we'll go over why in this guy's kit. So this is Gnut here. Absolutely fantastic champion, and we'll cover his kit and talk about why. He was actually part of the Arbiter limited time series as well. We have an A1, attacks one enemy 3 times, so already starting off good. Each hit, when booked, 100% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 15%. This is a 45% turn meter reduction, which is absolutely insane. If the target's turn meter is not decreased, each hit has a 100% chance of placing a freeze on the target for 1 turn instead each hit. So that's also 3 freezes being placed. So if you're using this guy in Fire Knight normal, you're going to be reducing the Fire Knight's turn meter by 45%. If you're using him in Fire Knight Hard, you're placing 3 freezes on that A1 with a 100% land rate, which is just absolutely insane already. We then have an A2, which is an AoE, 100% chance of placing a decreased attack and a weaken, so you're making them do less damage while taking more damage. Also, places a counter attack on this champion for 3 turns on a 2-turn cooldown, and if you haven't, for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, and if you haven't noticed already, all his damage is based on defense, so he's a tanky little bastard that won't die. He does a crap ton of damage, and we haven't even got to the best part of his kit yet, which is his A3. This skill is essentially the best skill for trying to kill a boss in the entire game. There's not really any champions that come even close to the amount of damage that this can deal, and that's counting even, for example, most mythicals, the only exception being maybe somebody like a Siegfried when he's paired up with a bunch of other teams. But if you're taking one champion into a dungeon and you're strictly saying, hey, I need this one champion to kill the boss or do as much damage to the boss in 1 turn as possible, this is basically the highest damage that you'll get to any boss inside the game, because most of the other champions have a cap on the amount of enemy max HP they can do, and they're only a 1 or a 2-turn hitter. The only exception to that really being Marius. Once people get Marius, he also has a 3-time hitter, which is based off enemy max HP, but it is an AoE, which will make it a little bit better. So it attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit decreases the target's defense by 3%, stacking up to 30%. So the more he does this and the longer the fight goes on, the more damage he's going to be able to deal. Each hit also heals this champion by 30% of the damage dealt, which is absolutely insane. And he also has a passive that when counterattacking, he deals 100% of damage instead of 75. He also has a ally accuracy in dungeons by 80 aura, which is absolutely insane. 80 accuracy is incredible. It's hard to understate, or to overstate rather, how good this is. So if you're progressing through a traditional dungeon, 80 accuracy is roughly going to be enough accuracy to carry you through 8 stages on its own, and that's not considering, Great Hall upgrades, banners, and all that sort of good stuff. So you can get to stage 8 using this guy alone, essentially, which is absolutely insane. How do I have him built out? I have him built out with 48,000 HP, 4,700 defense, 241 on the speed, obviously 100% crit rate, 255 crit damage, and 301 accuracy. Now, I primarily use him inside the Fire Knight's Castle, or the Fire Knight's Keep. So he's going to have 50,000 HP, 4,800 defense, 261 speed, 175 resistance, and then 381 accuracy. The accuracy is definitely coming in clutch there from the area bonuses. If you didn't have these area bonuses, you'd probably want to build him with a bit more accuracy, or, of course, run him as your aura lead. Now for his masteries, I do actually come down over here to Giant Slayer, which you can't see because of my head. I'll try and move you out of the way real quick here. Let's go over there for now. You can see I come down to Giant Slayer over here. Now let's go ahead. Oop, don't mind that. Clicked the wrong thing. We're going to go ahead and move back. So, and then on the right-hand side, I do come down to Master Hexer. You don't really need to worry too much about Master Hexer. I essentially just did this for his weakens and the decreased attacks. I find it useful to extend them sometimes. I would also recommend Methodical on the offense tree so that you can get more damage done by his default skill by 2% each time it's used during battle. So it's going to stack across each round as well, and it's going to increase that damage by up to 10%. So we've figured out that this champion is absolutely fantastic, as you can see from the reviews as well. Where do you use him? Well, the reviews are fairly accurate in this way that you're basically going to be able to use this guy everywhere except Arena. So Arena in any form isn't really his forte, just because if you're looking for defensive-based damage dealers, there's a lot better options. His A2 doesn't hit that hard. When it comes down to it, I will go ahead and throw the multipliers here on the screen now for you to check out. As you can see, the multiplier definitely doesn't hit incredibly hard. There's going to be better options out there for most players for just damage dealers in, PvP content. That being said, though, if you can pick an area that has PvE content, you can use this guy in that content. So we're talking City of Centranos, basically every single dungeon out there. There's not going to be really anybody that chunks down Dragon or Fire Knight or Spider or anybody like that as quick as this guy. You can use him in Iron Twins, obviously. You can use him basically anywhere. Some of the fastest teams for Phantom Shogun as well as Sand Devils revolve around having multiple Gnuts on the team. Some of the world record event dungeon teams also revolve around having like 3 or 4 Gnuts on the team. I would not recommend empowering this guy, mainly because unless you're a Filthy or a Whale specifically, you're not going to want to spend those extra copies to get the extra little bit of stats on this guy, like the 10% HP and defense and all that sort of stuff. Rather, you'd want to build the secondary Gnut. If you have like 30 copies of this guy, yeah, maybe you can empower a couple of them, but for most players, I would say that's extremely unlikely, especially if you're not remortgaging your house to do it. Let's go ahead and let's go into Fire Knight Hard here. So this is the team that I use for Fire Knight Hard, basically as free-to-play friendly as you are going to get for this particular dungeon. We have Zenogre, who was a fusion. We have Lady Mikage, who is a continual fusion. We have Farrakhan the Fat. If you don't have either of these champions, you can replace them with basically any ally attacker that you might have. So, for example, if I wasn't running Farrakhan, I would probably be running a Cardial in that spot. The only thing is I don't want to run Cardial because I do actually make use of the decreased defense that comes in from Farrakhan. I do have Neldor, and then I also have Gnut. Neldor is essentially coming in to do multiple A1s with his freeze, and then he also teams up with somebody if they're placing a freeze as well. So he can be absolutely insane in conjunction with Gnut to basically just keep down the Fire Knight shield. Now, this is how the AI is set up, so you can see Zenogre is set up like this. We want her opening with her Blade Strike, because that's a 4x hitter. She has no books in her either, so you don't need to worry about booking her out. This is how Farrakhan is set up, basically doing whatever he wants until the 3rd wave. Make sure that you turn off the Brand of Shame. The reason for that is if the debuff bar fills up, you won't be able to place your freezes, which means you won't be able to actually turn meter control them, which will kind of screw your run. Lady Mikage is set up like this, so she's going to metamorph over into her secondary form in round 1, and then she's going to prioritize her stun skill. Round 2, her metamorph is turned off, and in round 3, she metamorphs to open, so she'll go back into form 1. Then she opens and prioritizes her ally attack. We turned off the Silken Snare as well, because her A1 does actually bring in a Shadowkin ally whenever she uses it, which in this case is going to be Zenogre. If you happen to have somebody who's placing a freeze on an A1 from the Shadowkin, I don't even know if there's any champions like that so far, but if you do, that would be a good candidate as well. Neldor is basically set up like this. We want to have his Chromatic Cross available, because this is going to attack everybody 2 times, and each hit is going to have a 75% chance of placing a decreased speed. If we get the decreased speed on the boss, it's actually going to be quite nice, and it's going to make our run a little bit more consistent. And then lastly, Gnut does basically whatever he wants, except we're disabling that A2. We're not really worried about that. Now, one thing to call out about Gnut as well is he is absolutely fantastic inside of refresh accessories or inside of any sort of cooldown reduction gear sets. So if you have refresh accessories that you can throw on him, or if you have some sort of like, for example, what's the set? Reflex set or something like that. There's also the Impulse set that's coming out from Live Arena. If you have gear sets like that, definitely throw it on your Gnut. He can do tons of work. Let's go ahead and take a look at how this runs. On stage 6, a Fire Knight Hard, this particular team is a 100% success rate team. There's no fails to this. I have not had it fail yet, and I've run this for probably over 500 runs at this point. It is a little bit inconsistent when you get to stage 10 of the Fire Knight, though, and that's just simply because of the additional shield ticks, as well as obviously the extra speeds coming in from the Fire Knight himself. Now, you can see from Gnut's A2 there, he doesn't do an absolute ton of damage on the A2. Like I mentioned, he's not really coming in for that particular damage. You can see on his A3, though, he's doing 50k per hit, which is going to work out to 150k. And then these mobs don't have anywhere near as high of max HP as the final boss is going to, so you'll get to see him chunk it down a little bit. I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to fast forward through this until we're getting onto the boss, and I'll show you how that looks. Now, we are on to Wave 2. We're just finishing up Wave 2 here of the Fire Knight. A couple things I wanted to call out as well is it might look like Gnut's not doing very much damage, but he's first of all not built out inside Helm Smasher, so he's not ignoring additional defense. He's also not built inside of any sort of a lethal or a savage set or anything like that, so he's not having inbuilt ignore defense. And then very rarely do we actually have a decreased defense on the enemy team as well. It's pretty much just going to be the weakens that are placed by him. You can see that we are almost done Wave 2 here, and we're about 2.5 minutes in so far. This is usually about a 4 to 6 minute run, so it does take us a little while in some cases to work through the Fire Knight as well. It is going to depend on a little bit of RNG, so for example, how often Phantom Touch is proccing, as well as how often they're getting Giant Slayer procs and all those sorts of good things. So you can see Lady Mikage is going to switch back over. She ally attacks, everybody comes in with her multi-hit A1s, and we almost get the shield down on the first hit each time, which is pretty fantastic. We then have Zenogre come in with her 4 times hitter. That means that once Farrakhan the Fat is coming in, everybody is basically just decreasing that turn meter, which is fantastic. And then, of course, we will have Neldor go ahead and try with his decreased speed, which we do actually get there. So the decreased speed going on the boss essentially just makes it a little bit more stress-free. So essentially, Gnut is going to have more time to cycle around. Because, for example, if you have your A3 enabled, and you can see here, look at those absolute chunks. So 4 hits for 403,000. That is about 1.3, 1.4 million. I guess more specifically be about 1.2 million in a single turn from this guy against the Fire Knight Hard. There is not a single champion in the game that's going to be able to do that because any sort of max HP skills are capped at 10% HP. So unless they're also hitting for max HP damage, which would be the 10% 3 times, he's just out damaging basically anybody else. As I was saying, though, essentially, if Gnut has his A3 turned on, sometimes what will happen, especially if your champions aren't fast enough, is he will not have enough turn meter reduction up there. So when he does the A3, the Fire Knight actually loops around and gets a turn. If you're having troubles like that, I would recommend speeding your champions up a little bit. Or for the time being, until you have better gear or whatnot, just go ahead and disable his A3 on the Wave 3, just so he's doing the turn meter decrease. Now, you can kind of see how ridiculously OP it would be to have both, so Neldor be replaced by a Gnut as well, right? So having that turn meter reduction on the A1, in one turn of them both doing their A3, you'd have over half the boss health bar gone as well, which would be absolutely insane. So you can see Gnut here is actually our highest damage dealer. We have Zenogre doing 1.9 million, which is pretty good. We have Gnut doing 2.936 million, almost 3 million damage coming out of this guy. Then we have Neldor doing almost 1 million on his own. Farrakhan and Lady Mikage kind of bringing up the rear there, but again, they're support champions. They're not really meant to be damage dealers in any way, shape, or form. Now, last thing to talk about in this video, and this is not related to Gnut, but I am going to be opening my Mortal Soul Stones, all of them that I can here. Most likely you'll see a video on that perhaps tomorrow once we have the clan versus clan live. Let me know down below if you guys plan on opening it. If you're curious, this is kind of what my wish list looks like here. These are the champions that I'm hoping to get some souls for. Let me know if you guys are also opening during this event, and I would be curious to hear who is on your wish list as well. I definitely would like to see a mythical wish list option too, even if it was just for like 1 champion or something like that. It'd be pretty cool. Definitely understand why they don't have that though, and I don't think they will add it at any point in the near future until we have a lot more mythicals in the game. It is what it is. I'm excited to see how the game goes. Thank you guys all so much for watching though, and I'll see you in the next video.